How many dull drill bits do you have in your toolbox? I know I have a drawer full of them. Will the drill doctor take care of them? We'll see in just a moment. I'm Tim Johnson. You're watching Shop Tool Reviews. Today we've got the Drill Doctor X2 drill bit sharpener, and it'll also sharpen knives and scissors as well. Now there are some things it won't sharpen. We'll get into that and talk about the details in a moment, but it will handle your typical 118-degree tip drill bit. Now let's actually see how well it does. This is the Drill Doctor X2. Obviously it's a drill bit sharpening system, but it does more than that. It will also sharpen kitchen knives, pocket knives, right here on the back where you can slide it through. It'll hit this ceramic wheel here, and it will sharpen straight blades as well. And with this little adapter here, you can also sharpen scissors and other 35-degree tools, which would be like hatchets, axes, things like that. Now let's talk about the X2 and its main purpose here, or at least its shop purpose. Now, first, Drill Doctor has several models of drill bit sharpeners. This is the X2, which is kind of considered their DIY model, or their DIYer model. There's also I think the 500 and the 750. It might be 500X and 750X. Those will do additional drill bits, but it also requires a little more setup as well. So this is definitely an easier to use model, and it's going to be great for those typical drill bits, which is your typical 118-degree tip drill bits. Let's talk about drill bits and what this will actually sharpen. So obviously it'll sharpen scissors with this, and hatchets and axes, also sharpen knives. We're really not going to pay attention to that today per se. We're going to talk about sharpening drill bits, because if you're like me, you've got a drawer full of used drill bits, and I assure you this was nothing more than a hand grab of the drill bits that I have, that when they go dull, when they get a chip in them, I throw them in the drawer and think one day I'll sharpen them, and I'm yet to do so. Anyway, so I know we all have, if we're drilling into metal, we've all got those used drill bits where we've got bad tips. That's my assortment of such. So let's talk about what this Drill Doctor will sharpen and what it won't. Well, it's going to do your typical 118-degree tip. Now, what's a 118-degree tip and what's not? Sure, you could break out your protractor and degree finder, things like that, but it's pretty easy to tell actually, especially when you compare a typical 118-degree tip to a split tip design or 135-degree design. So let me show you. So what we have here is a typical 118-degree tip. And let me grab a split tip or a 135-degree tip. I've got a set here, and I'll pull out a bigger one because that's just easier to see. So number one, if we compare these two next to one another, I don't know if you can tell this, but one of them is a flatter tip than the other. So this one here has a lot shallower ramp, if you will, on that tip than this one does. So this is the 118, this is 135. Easier to see though is on the back side, or the trailing edge, so not the part that'll cut. This would be the part that would cut, and then on this back side you see this ramp down. Sometimes it's curved, sometimes it's a straight cut. This is curved here. That tells you that's a split tip design. Now that's different from, say, a bullet point design, which would be right here. So this is more of a bullet tip design, and that's even different than the split tip. So we'll just throw that aside here. But anyway, this is a split tip design, and this is your standard 118-degree tip. The Drill Bit Doctor, the Drill Doctor, will actually handle this one here. It will not handle the split tip. Now their 500X and their 750X sharpeners will handle these 135-degree and split tip designs here. So right now, if you have a 135-degree set or a split tip drill bit, the Drill Doctor X2 is not going to handle that. So we won't be showing that. We'll be showing your standard 118-degree tip, as well as masonry bits. So your masonry bits, it will handle that as well, which basically you have a little carbide tip that sits up here, and that needs to get sharpened, and that's another 118-degree tip design. So we'll be able to handle that as well. And obviously you won't be able to sharpen your step bits. I don't know of a step bit sharpener, so once you trash those, they're trashed. And it's not going to sharpen your paddle bits, your spade bits. So So we're talking about standard 118 degree tip twist drill bits as well as masonry bits, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And chances are, if you're buying cheap kits, things like that, that's probably what you have is just your old standard bits. And by the way, now you can put a bit set together for your brother-in-law to use, your cousin to use, all those people who say, hey, do you have some drill bits I can use? And they can damage them and you can sharpen them again. You don't have to loan out that cobalt set. So let's get started. So let's actually go and chuck a couple of these up in the drill press and see how bad they are, and then we'll sharpen them and then use them and see how much better they get. Okay, so we got a few drill bits here. I don't know, this is probably somewhere between 3/8 and a 1/2 inch. And then we've got one that's, I don't know, these are probably close to between 3/8 and 1/4. And then we have a masonry bit. Obviously, we will not be using a masonry bit into this steel. I think this steel is about 3/8 of an inch. I know it's thicker than 1/4 inch, so let's just call it 5/16. And let's chuck up the smaller ones here. Just want to get an idea of how sharp they are right now. So I'm putting moderate pressure on there, and we are not getting a good cut. A lot of dust. So obviously with no lube, we're starting to heat up pretty good. I'm putting a good amount of pressure on there. So we can see that drill bit is not cutting like it should at all. And again, I'm putting quite a bit of pressure. Starting to chatter and probably starting to burn up the tip for sure. So let's stop this. We'll pull that one out. We'll put our awesome gold titanium drill bit in here. You know, these are supposed to last forever and be the sharpest drill bits in the world. Joking. Let me move this just a touch. That one's actually not doing too bad. I'm putting a lot of pressure on there. So it's actually not doing too bad. So that's probably a bad test model. But we'll still run with it. So we know the smaller gold one is still cutting pretty well. And then we'll go to the big one here. So I'm putting, I don't know, probably 20 pounds, 30 pounds of pressure on it right now, if not more. And we are barely making a dent in that metal whatsoever. So probably the chisel tip is gone on this, which is actually the point of the drill bit, as well as the leading edges are not cutting either. So if your chisel tip's gone and your leading edges aren't cutting, you're never going to get that through, and your flutes really don't matter at that point. You got to get that tip sharp. Okay, so let's go sharpen some drill bits. Okay, so quick tutorial on using this. First, this is not a, when you spin this to tighten these drill bits, it does not turn in a smooth circle. It has a cam effect here, and so you can see like ears on this as I turn it here. It's very shallow here, and it's more pronounced there. So as you turn this, it's going to rock back and forth. So understand that. You can see that this is rocking back and forth as I turn. And it's made to do that. You'll see here there's a little spring right there, so that as this rides on this collar or in that cylinder, it will actually give and rock. And what that's doing, that's making that contoured, that ramp, if you will, on a drill bit, because on a drill bit we have to have a leading edge that cuts, and then the rest of this has to slope downward. In other words, kind of get out of the way, but we have to have that leading edge, just like a lawnmower blade needs to have a cutting edge. We need a cutting edge on our drill bit as well. So anyway, let's just mock one up here. And so what we're going to do is stick the drill bit through, and it says stick about a 1/2 inch through. Not going to worry about how much I got sticking out. I've got quite a bit there. And then these little teeth right here, these little tangs, need to ride in the flutes, which are the blank areas here in the drill bit. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down, and it says that these need to rest against the leading edge of the drill bit. So this, as your drill bit turns, this is the leading edge, that's the trailing edge. So those little teeth sticking out need to reside against that leading edge. And then you want to tighten it enough where it won't fall out, but not too tight where we can't still, you can see I can still push it. And so let's make sure that leading edge is against there. And I've got it snug, but not tight. And then we want to put it in the machine, and we want to line up. There's a triangle here. If I turn it around 180 degrees, there's a triangle there. There's a single mark here, and if I turn 180, I've got a double mark there. So I want to line up the triangle with the cam pin right here. So this steel pin right here, that's what I want to line up one of these triangles with. And again, let's make sure I've got a 1/2 inch stick out, and then I'm against my leading edge. And then I'll line up that triangle. I'll line up that triangle there, and then push this down. And once I get it to bottom out, I'll tighten this to snug it, and then actually pull this out and finish tightening it. You don't have to like get this super duper tight, but make sure you're up against the leading edge, which I'm not. So I'm going to redo that there. I'm going to stick this through. Snug that up. Line up the triangle again and push that in, and now snug it down. Yep, so now I'm against that leading edge, and now I'm going to crank it a little bit and get it good and tight. And so then we have 2 speeds on this. The low speed is for sharpening scissors and small knives, things like that, but we're going to put it on 2, and it does make a little bit of a noise. On 1, pretty quiet machine. On 2, it actually makes a little bit of a racket. So you may not be able to hear me very well in this as we crank it up, but I'm going to go ahead and start it. And again, I want to line my triangle up with the steel pin. Here we go. And then, so once I do this, I want to turn 180 degrees from the single mark to the double mark to the single mark to the double mark. Now, smaller drill bits will take less passes. Larger drill bits will take more passes. It says basically let it sharpen and keep going until you don't hear it sharpening anymore. So I'm going to turn it on. So a smooth 180 degrees. And you see that rocking motion. Now we're going to take a look, and we want to make sure that the whole face has been ground or has been sharpened. I'm going to make a couple of more passes, but I can see that I've got my chisel tip as well as the leading edge. Looks pretty good here. Maybe missing a little bit. So let's hit that one more time. So I never did get it to where I didn't hear it sharpening at all, but I definitely have a nice tip on that drill bit now. Okay, now we're going to go to our gold drill bit here. I don't know, it's probably 5/16 or so, and make sure that our little tang sticking out there is on that leading edge. And where it's snug and not too tight. Seat it. Pull it out, tighten it. Again, let's make sure we're against that leading edge. And you can see our tip is gold right now. We should see a nice shiny tip that's newly ground when we're done. So again, going to line up the triangle marks. Okay, let's have a look. And yeah, we can see that our tip is nice and ground all the way around, nice and uniform. We've got a chisel tip there in the center. Our leading edge looks good. Yeah, I think we're good on that one. So lastly, let's do our big guy here. And again, this guy is beat up pretty good here. We can see what's happening here. We still got a little spot here that hasn't cleaned up on this tip, so I'm going to run it just, in fact, I'm going to adjust it just a touch, or readjust it, put it in here. And let's go at it again. Okay, this tip was pretty bad, and so I can see that there's still some parts of it here that hasn't cleaned up well, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust this once again. Run it out. Seat it. Tighten it up, and now let's clean that up one last time. Now that's looking much better. I still see a little remnants of that chip there. We're going to try it as it is and see how well it will actually cut. But I do see a little mark there still from that big chip that was in there, but it's definitely cleaning up that tip and giving us that chisel back. Lastly, we're going to do this masonry bit. Now we do this a little bit different in the fact that we want these teeth up against the bottom edge of that carbide cutting tip, which is not too pronounced on this one. So we want those tangs to be right up under the carbide cutting tip, like that. And then you go ahead and tighten this down. This one seems a little bit more complicated or a little more difficult than the way they're saying, but they wanted this tang sticking out to be right below the carbide tip there to hold that drill bit. So let's see how this does here. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work on that. I think that just ruined that tip. So on the masonry, I'm assuming when you have a more pronounced trailing edge there, maybe on this one. Yeah, so on this one here, there's much more pronounced carbide tip, or the bottom of the carbide tip. And so now I've got those metal tangs that are sticking out up under that carbide tip. And now let's see. Okay, I'm not so sure about the masonry bit. I may have just ruined that because it's basically ground the top all the way off of that. So don't hold me to that one. Maybe I messed it up, but I thought I read the instructions correctly. So anyway, let's forget about the masonry bit and let's go test the twist bits. Okay, so what we're going to do here, clean off our metal a little bit. And the first one we used, I think, was the silver drill bit. I'm just going to slide a piece of metal back here. So this is the first hole we did with it, which didn't cut very well, but now we have got a new tip cut on there. So hopefully it shall work. Same speed in the drill press, And here we go. Yeah, so now if you remember before I was cutting dust, now I'm actually cutting some nice pigtails and chunks. That's what we want to see. So yeah, definitely an improvement on that drill bit for sure. So no lube, you see we got some blue chips there, definitely starting to heat up, but no lube cutting through that 5/16 inch steel. Now we know this one cut pretty good already, but we went ahead and dressed it up anyway. Yeah. So did it improve? Yeah, I think so. But again, we had a good tip on that already. But dressing it up definitely did not hurt it one bit. We cut through there much quicker than I believe we even started the other one. So before, you see we didn't get so much as a dimple out of this drill bit. So now we've dressed it up with the drill doctor, and let's see what kind of cut we get out of it. Now typically I drill a pilot hole before I drilled something this big, but we're just going to go for it. Oh yeah. Absolute stellar improvement. I mean, night and day. It was an unusable drill bit before. Now it's an absolutely usable drill bit. And these are the type of drill bits, these larger bits, is where you're going to spend money on them. So, you know, being able to dress these up and fix them, that adds up quite a bit right there. So even after cutting that hole, we've got a good looking tip still. We may have heated it up just a touch, but even with that little nick still left in there, it's still cut very well. I've tried other drill bit sharpeners before. I've even tried sharpening them on belt sanders, on grinding wheels, and I just haven't been successful. I know there's some geometry and understanding of the ramp from the leading edge to the trailing edge and making sure that the leading edge is leading and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I've never been really successful at doing so. Maybe it got me by into drilling that last hole, but I just have a ton of dull drill bits in my drawer that I never throw away. And I think someday I'll sharpen these. Well, the drill bit doctor allowed us to do so. Now we couldn't do our split tips, our 135 degree tip drill bits that also have that secondary kind of ramp off effect on the trailing edge. And we can't do like your bullet tips as well, and obviously you can't do any step bits. Now, we also didn't have a lot of success in doing those masonry bits, but I kind of looked at some of my other masonry bits, and some of them have a much more defined carbide tip and that bottom level, if you will, where they want those tangs to actually line up with. So I think some masonry bits it's going to do well with, and others it's not. But again, maybe that's all my fault, so don't hold me to the masonry bits. As far as your typical 118 degree tip drill bits, it did very well. You saw this, I don't know, I probably ought to put a mic on it or a dial caliper, but this is bigger than 3/8 and probably not quite a 1/2 inch, but it made that actually be a very good drill bit, where before it wouldn't even put a dimple in that steel. And obviously the other bits it did well also. Now the drill doctor, the X2 is going to run you $119. So that's not, you know, just a little bit of money, but at the same time, a nice drill bit index will cost you that or more as well. Especially if you get into cobalt drill bits, going to be even higher than that. So to be able to keep those drill bits and dress them up and keep them cutting nice, this is a great tool to have. Also sharpen your scissors and knives also. I will say you probably need to look at your inventory, and if you're like me, a lot of my newer bits are 135 degree split tip design. So for me, I may want to pay that little bit extra to get that 500X or 750X from the drill bit doctor, so that I can take care of those split tip designs as well. But the X2 does give me that kind of nice all-around use of, and what they actually did was they combined with Work Sharp, which are professionals at sharpening knives and blades, things like that. And so now you get that dual use factor here of being able to sharpen your blades as well as your drill bits. But As far as drill bits goes, we think it did a great job. $119. We'll put a link in the description where you can find it. Also, keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you didn't like this video, then hit the dislike button or the thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day and keep smiling.